Imagine walking out into your backyard, looking at, the most annoying, aggressive weeds spreading across your lawn, and realizing you are actually staring at a mechanical masterpiece, and it's disguised as an orchid.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild thought, honestly.
Right. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a magnifying glass to the mundane today.
Literally.
Yes, literally.
Yeah.
We're jumping straight into a single, just incredibly revealing source for this session.
Which I'm very excited about.
Same. So it's a highly detailed gardening journal entry. It's dated August 6th, 2026, and the title is Notes on Gardening Part 978.
It's by an author named Ang, right?
Exactly. And our mission for you today, listening to this, is to explore how a literal shift in perspective, like just zooming in, can completely shatter your understanding of the world right outside your door.
It's such a great premise.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Because reading through Ang's journal, I couldn't help but picture a testing
I
laboratory.
think that's a good way to put it.
Right. Like, it feels like Ang's garden is this rigorous biological proving ground. And the most unglamorous utilitarian test subject in the whole facility suddenly steals the spotlight.
Yeah, and demands to be treated like a prized museum exhibit.
Exactly.
That framing gets right to the heart of what makes this journal entry so compelling, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what we have here is this beautifully documented intersection of daily, mundane routine, and then, boom, sudden, unexpected discovery.
Wait, because Ang isn't, like, hacking through the Amazon rainforest here.
Exactly. Or embarking on some grand botanical expedition to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
We are simply reading the notes of a person standing in their own garden.
Just doing routine maintenance.
Right. But they managed to summon the sheer presence of mind to stop the autopilot, and actually observe.
And the catalyst for this whole realization is this plant. It's known as the king of bitters.
Yes.
The scientific name Ang gives us is andrographis-paniculata.
Which is a bit of a mouthful, but yes.
Definitely. But what strikes me immediately is the incredibly transactional way this plant is introduced into the narrative.
Oh, totally. It's very utilitarian.
Yeah, Ang openly admits to harvesting and potting the king of bitters purely to use it as a, quote, specimen for evaluating my different gardening areas.
Right.
I read that and immediately had to pause.
Yeah.
Because using a living plant as an evaluator, is this like a biological stress test?
Actually, yes.
So it's using a ridiculously resilient plant as a botanical guinea pig to see if the soil's actually viable.
That is the exact underlying mechanism of what Ang is doing. And it's a time-honored, highly pragmatic horticultural strategy.
Really? I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. When you establish a new gardening zone, you do not start by planting your most delicate, finicky, or, frankly, expensive cultivars.
Oh, because they might just die immediately.
Exactly. You deploy a hardy, robust indicator species first.
Okay, I see.
The logic is simple, right? If a notoriously tough plant, like the king of bitters, struggles to survive in a specific patch of dirt, you instantly know that the foundational elements are compromised.
Like the soil composition or something.
Right. Soil composition, the drainage, the pH balance, maybe the light exposure is wrong.
Oh, wow. So it saves you from losing valuable plants down the line.
Exactly.
It functions exactly like the canary in the coal mine, but for soil quality.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
If the canary faints, don't plant the prize-winning roses there.
Precisely. But that sheer utility creates a fascinating psychological blind spot, which Eng documents perfectly in the journal.
How so?
Well, because the plant is so exceptionally robust, and because it was brought in strictly to do a job, its aesthetic existence is completely ignored.
Ah, right. It's just there to work.
Yeah, the journal details how the king of bitters began self-propagating everywhere. Like, it aggressively spread throughout all the different gardening areas.
Right. Ang mentions it just sort of took over.
And that very success, that sheer ubiquity, is exactly what makes it invisible to the human eye.
Wait, invisible because it's everywhere.
Exactly. When an organism is everywhere, and when it thrives without our careful intervention or coddling, we naturally downgrade it to the status of a common weed.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
We have this subconscious tendency to conflate biological resilience with a lack of beauty.
Wow. That is a staggering realization. We conflate resilience with a lack of beauty.
It's totally true, though.
It is. because Ang didn't have to carefully monitor its water intake
Hmm.
or, protect it from the elements.
Right, no special greenhouse required.
So the plant's physical appearance just became background noise. It was doing its job almost too well, spreading everywhere, so it just became part of the wallpaper.
Yeah, its evolutionary success was the very thing masking its structural complexity. We tend to prioritize what we have to work for.
Right.
So since this plant demanded absolutely nothing of the gardener demanded nothing of the plant visually.
But then the narrative takes this sharp turn.
Yeah.
Because the king of bitters has colonized the entire yard, right?
Right.
Ang finally decides to stop, point a camera at it, and take some macro photographs.
Which changes everything.
Totally. We're talking about getting the lens mere millimeters away from the blooms. And here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does.
Because the moment that lens finds its focus, Ang is hit with what I can only describe as a botanical optical illusion.
Yes. The shift from macro environment to micro detail completely alters the reality of the specimen.
It forces a complete reevaluation of what's actually growing in the dirt.
Exactly.
Because Ang describes looking at the playback on the screen and suddenly seeing these incredibly intricate, small, two-lipped white flowers.
Yeah.
And on the lower petal lip, there are these highly distinctive purple markings.
Right. They almost look painted on.
Yeah, almost like deliberately painted spots or some complex pattern. And Ang specifically notes that the overall architectural structure of this tiny flower shares a striking, undeniable passing resemblance to an orchid.
Which is wild for a weed.
Right. Especially that lower protruding lip, which I learned is called the labellum.
The labellum, yes, that's correct.
Okay, good. To put this in perspective for you listening, it feels like buying a cheap knockoff watch at a flea market, right?
Okay, I like this.
And then prying off the back purely out of boredom and realizing it contains a handcrafted, impossibly complex Swiss mechanical movement inside.
Oh, that's a brilliant comparison.
It's a perfect mimic of something highly specialized, just hiding inside a mundane exterior.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how macro photography completely shifts our aesthetic appreciation.
Yeah.
It forces us to see the deliberate design in something we usually walk right past. Because you have to remember, the human eye and brain are primarily optimized to take in the macro environment.
Like the big picture.
Right. We stand for movement, we spot predators, we navigate complex terrain. We are not naturally equipped to appreciate deliberate millimeter-level architectural design without technological help.
Oh, that's so true. We just don't have the hardware for it natively.
Exactly. When Ang looks through that macro lens, the blur of the background isolates the subject. Those purple markings, for instance.
Yeah.
They are not random blotches of pigment. In the botanical world, those are nectar guides.
Nectar guides.
Yeah. They act as highly evolved ultraviolet landing pads designed to aggressively direct specific pollinators right into the reproductive machinery of the flower.
So the flower is literally painting a runway for insects, complete with directional lights, and we are just completely oblivious to it from 5 feet away.
Yep. And that resemblance to an orchid that Ang notes.
Yeah, the labellum.
It is no accident of perception. It is a masterclass in convergent evolution.
Convergent evolution, meaning they evolved the same trait separately.
Exactly. Orchids are globally famous for that labellum, that pronounced, elaborate lower lip that serves as a sturdy platform for heavy insects like bees to land on.
Okay, right.
Because the king of bitters has evolved to target similar types of pollinators, it has developed a very similar two-lipped landing pad structure.
Oh, wow. So the visual similarity is so striking that it immediately elevates the status of the plant in Ang's mind.
Totally.
It goes from being a disposable evaluator weed to something resembling botanical royalty.
Right, you see an orchid, you think high-status flower.
I can completely understand why Ang's mind went straight to orchids. If you see that specialized lip and those intricate markings, your brain naturally categorizes it with the most exotic flowers you know.
Sure, it makes perfect sense.
And this is a massive point of friction in the journal entry. Ang goes out of the way to clarify that it is absolutely not an orchid.
No. Despite the stunning visual mimicry, it sits on an entirely different branch of the evolutionary tree.
Right. Ang breaks down the taxonomic reality for us, pointing out that the king of bitters actually belongs to the Acanthaceae family.
Yes.
Not the Orchidaceae family. And the journal uses the macro shots to prove exactly why. But I have to admit, looking at the notes, I found myself getting a bit lost in the weeds here.
Pun intended.
Huh. Yeah, pun intended. But seriously, wait, so even though they both have that distinctive lower lip, it's the hidden machinery, those hairy protruding stamens, that totally gives away its true family identity.
That is exactly it.
But why? Like, if it
Mm-hmm.
looks like a duck and acts like a duck, why are botanists putting it in a completely different category?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this touches on the very foundation of how the science of taxonomy operates.
Okay.
When botanists classify the natural world, they do not rely on the superficial paint job. They look under the hood at the engine.
The mechanics of it.
Right. The petals, what we call the corolla, are just the advertising budget of the plant.
The advertising budget. I love that.
Petal shapes, colors, landing pads, they can be highly malleable. They morph and change over generations based on whatever specific pollinator happens to be abundant in the local neighborhood.
Also, they just adapt to whatever bug is flying around.
Exactly. That is why entirely unrelated plants can end up looking so remarkably similar. They are just solving the exact same logistical problem, like how to attract a specific species of carpenter bee.
That makes a lot of sense. They were putting up the exact same billboard because they are trying to attract the exact same customer, even if the companies are completely unrelated.
Perfect way to frame it.
Yeah.
But the engine of the plant, the actual reproductive machinery,
Yeah.
that is deeply stubbornly tied to the plant's genetic lineage. And this is where Eng's macrophotography really does the heavy lifting.
Right, because it lets us see the engine.
Exactly. The journal points out two major anatomical features. First is that two-lipped corolla structure, structurally known as bilabiate.
Bilabiate, got it.
But the real smoking gun, the definitive proof of its family lineage, is in the stamens. Eng's macro shots reveal distinctive, protruding stamens that are covered in fine hairs.
Okay, stop right there. The hairy stamens. How does that tiny detail rule out it being an orchid?
Because the Acanthaceae family, which claims our king of bitters, relies on a very traditional, albeit highly specialized, mechanical setup for reproduction.
Okay.
Those protruding, hairy stamens are designed to physically brush loose pollen onto the back of an insect as it pushes its way inside to get the nectar.
Like a little car wash brush.
Exactly. But true orchids operate entirely differently. Orchids are famous for fusing their male and female reproductive parts into a single, solid tubular structure called a column.
Oh, so they don't have those loose hairy stalks at all.
Nope. And instead of loose pollen, orchids package their pollen into solid, sticky masses called pollinia.
Wait, solid masses?
Yeah, which literally glue themselves to the insect's head.
Whoa. So the macro lens didn't just show Eng a pretty picture. It functioned almost like a biological X-ray into the plant's evolutionary history.
That's exactly what it did.
By zooming in, Eng peeled back the superficial architectural mimicry of the petals to reveal the mechanical truth of the stamens.
Right. Eng is performing real taxonomic dissection just through the viewfinder of a camera. The author is moving past the aesthetic illusion of the orchid-like labellum and understanding the rigid biological reality of the specimen.
Which naturally leads to the next massive question I had while reading this.
Well, what's that?
Well, the stamens explain the family lineage, sure, but they do not explain the invasion.
Ah, the yard takeover.
Yeah. If this plant isn't using a highly specialized, hyper-efficient orchid reproduction system, how did it manage to aggressively take over Eng's entire yard? We established in the very beginning that this plant was self-propagating everywhere.
Right, well, the flower is only half the story.
Okay.
The reproductive machinery of the stamens seamlessly transitions into the result of that machinery, which Eng actually observes right next to the blooms.
The seed pods.
Yes, exactly.
Because Eng notes that visible right alongside these delicate orchid-like flowers, the plant produces these tiny capsule-like seed pods. And the journal drops a detail about how these pods function that it completely blew my mind.
Yeah.
Eng writes that these capsules burst open to propagate by wind.
It's wild.
So what does this all mean? Because to me, it sounds less like gardening and more like microscopic botanical shrapnel.
It is an incredibly violent and effective biological mechanism. It's known as explosive dehiscence.
Explosive dehiscence.
Yes, and it completely solves the mystery of the plant's ubiquity in Eng's garden.
Break down the physics of that for me, because it sounds like the plant is manufacturing tiny pressure cookers.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy, actually. As the seed capsule matures and begins to dry out, the cells on the outside of the pod lose moisture and shrink at a drastically different rate than the cells on the inside.
Oh, so it creates a tension.
Immense mechanical stress within the cellular walls. It is essentially pulling back the string on a microscopic bow, building up massive amounts of kinetic energy.
Just waiting to snap.
Exactly. When the tension finally overcomes the structural integrity of the pod's seam snap, the capsule fractures violently, launching the seeds into the air currents at astonishing speeds, effectively throwing them far away from the parent plant.
So it isn't just passively dropping seeds and hoping for the best.
Not at all.
It isn't waiting for a bird to come along, eat a berry, and deposit the seed somewhere else. This plant is actively, mechanically launching its offspring to conquer new territory.
It is taking its propagation entirely into its own hands. And this synthesis of delicate form and aggressive function is what makes the andrographis-paniculata so profoundly fascinating.
It really is.
It actively defies our categorical expectations. As humans, we have a bias, right? We expect beautiful, intricate things to be fragile. And we expect tough, invasive weeds to be brutish and ugly.
Oh, that's such a good point.
The King of Bitters shatters that binary. It is simultaneously a masterclass in delicate, intricate floral design and a ruthless, explosive conqueror.
And discovering that duality completely shifts the author's entire mindset. The final section of this journal entry isn't just about the botany.
No, it's about the gardener, really.
Yeah, it is about how the act of observation changes the observer.
Yeah.
The physical, mechanical reality of the plant directly inspires a change in the gardener's own mechanics.
Exactly.
Ang concludes the entry by stating that this entire experience has enticed them to seek out a good macrophotography system for the future. The author mentions researching a mobile setup or maybe investing in a dedicated digital camera system.
It is the genesis of a completely new passion, sparked entirely by the decision to look closely at something previously deemed mundane.
I love how infectious that curiosity is. Ang originally used this plant to evaluate the soil, but in the end, the plant ended up evaluating Ang.
Oh, wow. I like that.
It tested the gardener's ability to actually see what was right in front of them. And having passed that test, Ang now has this deep hunger for better tools to keep exploring this hidden layer of reality.
And, this raises an important question about how everyday technology can profoundly change our relationship with the mundane natural world right outside our doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for centuries, if you wanted to observe the fine hairs on the stamens of the Acanthaceae family or study the cellular tension of a seed pod, you needed access to a university laboratory.
Or some expensive greenhouse.
Exactly, or highly specialized optical equipment. Today, the technology sitting in our pockets, like the macro capabilities of a standard smartphone camera, can profoundly alter our relationship with the immediate environment.
That's so true. We all have microscopes in our pockets now.
Ang's journal entry is a brilliant testament to the democratization of scientific discovery. You do not need to be a credentialed botanist on a research grant to uncover the structural secrets of evolutionary biology. You just need a lens and the patience to look.
The patience to look. That is the core of it, isn't it? Because observation is an active choice.
Absolutely.
Every day, we make the choice to either step over the weed in the driveway or to kneel down, focus the lens, and see it for what it is. Ang chose to kneel down.
And reap the rewards.
Yeah. And by doing that, the author completely demystified the utilitarian magic of the garden, while simultaneously making the space infinitely more magical. It went from being a flat, two-dimensional backdrop of green to a three-dimensional, highly engineered machine.
It is a wonderful paradox. By stripping away the superficial illusion of the orchid and understanding the mechanical truth of the hairy stamens and the bursting pods, the King of Bitters becomes far more compelling than if it had merely been a pretty flower.
Totally.
The reality of its engineering completely outshines the illusion of its aesthetics.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to connect this directly back to you, the listener. Because the primary takeaway from Ang's August 2026 journal entry is not just a trivia fact about the taxonomic differences between orchids and weeds.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It is a fundamental reminder that you do not need to book a flight to a remote jungle or hike up a secluded mountaintop to encounter staggering, intricate beauty. As Ang's garden proves, a simple, utilitarian evaluator weed holds a literal universe of complexity. You just have to take the time to alter your perspective.
We often forget that the extraordinary is constantly masquerading as the ordinary, just waiting to be caught in the right light.
Which leaves us with something to think about the next time you walk out your front door. We rely so heavily on that quick, panoramic view of our surroundings. We glance at the yard and assume we've seen the whole picture. But if a simple, utilitarian plant like the King of Bitters hides such intricate, orchid-like complexity and explosive wind-bursting pods completely invisible to the naked eye, what other microscopic dramas and brilliant architectural designs are playing out entirely unnoticed on the weeds growing right now in the cracks of your own driveway?